Hi, I'm Yusuf. In fact, actually, I'm so sad because I'm starving from all my heart to visit our cities and our places in Palestine more than I want to visit Paris or Maldives Islands.
My dear friend Youssef was killed with his family this morning when an Israeli missile targeted their home in Bethlehem. I met him while visiting the whole We Are Not Numbers team in Gaza last year. This is what he told me when I asked, "What is your dream?" Youssef was an extremely talented writer and a bright young man. He deserved the world. Alhamdulillah that I had the honor to know him. Allah yarhamu. Hashtag Gaza under attack.
Why don't they allow Palestinian refugees to return to their homes? They'll tell you, because if Palestinian refugees come home, Israel will lose its Jewish majority. And therefore, they infer Jews would lose their dominance. So the right of return of refugees, which nobody disputes in any other setting, a natural right, nobody disputes that Syrian refugees should be able to return to Syria if they choose to, when it's safe to do so. No one says they have to go back against their will. That would be against international law. But nobody can deny them their right to return if they choose to, when it's safe to do so. That was true in the Balkans. It's a fundamental, one of the first clauses of the Dayton Accord, which ended the war in Bosnia. The right of return of refugees to their original homes, regardless of who is ruling that territory. And in fact, more than 500,000 refugees returned to their original homes in Bosnia, a country of about 3.5 million people, with full international support. Only in the case of Israel are we told that the desire of the Israeli state to maintain a specific racial or ethnic composition trumps the human rights of refugees. But the most clear expression of this willingness to commit inhuman acts for the purpose of maintaining the dominance of one group over another is the denial of the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes solely and exclusively because they are not Jewish, and for no other reason.
I'm nervous on the surface, I look fine. My brain feels heavy, my traumatized mind. And I'm so tired, I can't feel my eyes. Whoa, whoa. I'm petty, but I know how to lie. I feel feelings that I can't describe. I'm not breathing, but I'm still alive. Whoa, whoa.
Shout out to neoliberal tears for this.
Shout out to Twitter/X user neoliberal tears for resurfacing this clip.
Neoliberal tears commented at the top of the show, "What happened to my music?" One of my favorite commenters.
Yeah, big
Someone who has so much affection for me.
Keep it in mind.
I'ma give it everything I got.
Prepare for a holiday season of neoliberal tears.
More than 70% of the population of Gaza are refugees. They're not from Gaza. They're from towns and villages that are now inside Israel. And most of their land is empty. There are not Israelis living on it. Something like, we have good geographic studies of this, that 85% of the land from which the refugees were expelled is today vacant. So they could return. Physically, they could return. They are banned from returning solely and exclusively because they are not Jewish.
The overall feeling that I have is one, when I think about it, for any length of time, is one of astonishment at the sort of injustice of it. Here I am, a child of a people that's been sort of kicked out of its own land, forbidden to return. I mean, that is to say, most of the authors of these books, for example, are sometimes students who are employed by these agencies to spy on me and to find out what I say and this sort of thing. And if they're Jewish, just by fact of being Jewish, born in New York of a Jewish parent, they're entitled to go to Israel, or Palestine as I call it, become Israeli citizens at any time that they wish. I was born there, my father was born there, my grandfather, great-grand, etc. And I can't return. I don't have the same right. I mean, the law of return somehow covers them. And my people, my family, were kicked out of there. And they're writing books about me, accusing me of terrorism. I mean, the enormity of the whole thing just baffles me at the same time that it strikes me very strongly.
My grandfather was shot 11 times because he wouldn't refuse to leave his home. They put him in a car and he dumped him far away and everything. He survived, but that's back when, I mean, they didn't have the kind of weapons they have now. And even in the story, I remember my mother saying, we just kept begging him to leave and he wouldn't leave. Everybody had left to Jordan, but see that she wouldn't leave, he wouldn't leave. He's like, I'm not leaving. He was so latched on to his doing his trees, who his family before him, his father, everybody planted. He's like, I'm not leaving the olive tree farm. I'm not leaving these trees. He was so connected. I mean, if you ever see some of the Palestinian people grabbing on to their tree, it's because to them it's an extension of who they are. It's their family. And so the more we can tell our stories in that way, I think the more we can connect with so many people and grow this movement to try to save lives.
Mr. Natai, inasmuch as you're a Zionist and are committed to a Jewish state, given the fact that demographic predictions tell us that there will be an Arab majority within the current borders of Israel, does this not challenge the foundations of the very state which you are committed to?
I know of the latest figures, population figures, that actually show a decrease in the Arab birth rate, particularly in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, as a result of the higher education and the universal education for women that didn't exist prior to Israel, prior to 1967. Now, if you ask me, would I reject Palestinians or Arabs living in our midst? Ridiculous. Of course not. They're citizens of Israel. If they...
No, I'm talking about the West Bank and Gaza. You see, we're still going back to the core of it.
Yes, I agree. Whatever will be the final arrangement, these people should be free to multiply as they wish. I think that it is written in the Bible, multiply and be fruitful. I think these people should have that right. I'm not going to start enforcing a birth control program under any circumstance.
Thank you.
In full-page New York Times ad, liberal Zionist group calls for ethnic segregation to retain Jewish majority within Israel. Separation between Israelis and Palestinians is essential. Here's why. Population breakdown from the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan River. 2015, 52% Jewish. 2020, 49% Jewish. 2030, 44% Jewish. No separation today means a Palestinian majority by 2020. According to a recent poll, 97% of Israeli Jews want to live in a Jewish state. Without a two-state solution, Israel will end up as a binational state, half Jewish, half Arab. In a few more years, it will be too late. The dream of a Jewish state will be lost. Mr. Prime Minister, your people want to live in a Jewish state, not half Jewish, half Arab. You can make it happen. Separation today means a Jewish majority state of Israel, now and for generations ahead. It's time for separation. 2 states for 2 people.
What do you say of the tension between Palestinians, non-Jewish Palestinians, whether be they Arab, Muslim, or Christian, who want the right of return to Israel, the nation, but the recognition and the explicit, this is not intimation, explicitly, Netanyahu and others have said, the problem is that if there is a right of return, the population balance skews it so that it is no longer a Jewish state, right? So how do you negotiate that maintaining a Jewish state requires the exclusion of non-Jewish people, regardless of their rights to return to their homeland. And I mean, how do you parse that without understanding that is what people are objecting to about the nation of Zionism? Not the idea that Jewish people can move, the way everyone should be able to move.
Objecting to. We have
I'm sorry?
not the only thing people are objecting to. And there's a
Why
lot.
do you say that?
Because it's not. Because it's absolutely not. And there's a lot of land to talk about where absolutely the Israelis should not be there. They should have settlements should not exist. There should not be Israeli occupation of the West Bank. So you're talking about the right of return in a way that I'm actually not going to go into, because that's the kind of thing that needs to be negotiated. And I do remind you that 20% of Israeli population is Arab Palestinian. A Palestinian.
And what if it were 51%?
I'm not going there, Bree. I'm not having this conversation. I'm staying with what I said.
The four great powers are committed to Zionism, and Zionism, be it right or wrong, good or bad, is rooted in age-long traditions, in present needs, in future hopes of far profounder import than the desires and prejudices of the 700,000 Arabs who now inhabit that ancient land.
My mother was born and lived in Nazareth and married my father there in 1932. My father came from Jerusalem. And it wasn't really until about, I would say, maybe 10 or 15 years ago that she told me it's quite an extraordinary experience that she had. When she married my father, they had to register the wedding. And together, they went to the Palestine government mandatory office. The official there was an Englishman. And my mother said that she watched him sort of rip up her passport. And he, in amazement, my mother said, well, why are you doing this? He said, well, now you'll travel on your husband's passport. And she said, yes, but I mean, why did I have to lose mine in that way? And he said, well, because your place and this card is going to be given to a Jewish immigrant to Palestine. And the idea was that her identity was just, you know, just by a simple act of tearing up a piece of paper, was taken away from her by a foreigner. And she lived with the consequences of that for 30 years. And then she became, in the 50s, in the late 50s, a Lebanese citizen. And of course, she's not Lebanese, she's Palestinian.
For decades, most discussions around the world about so-called peace resolutions for Israel-Palestine have been focused on the questions of borders, settlement annexation, evacuation, Palestinian sovereignty, and Jerusalem. But the most basic and fundamental right that Palestinians, as a collective, are deprived of and deserve to receive in any real peace resolution is the one right people tend to ignore: the right of return for Palestinian refugees to anywhere they were uprooted from. Israel and the West got most of the world to think of it as a non-issue, some unrealistic fantasy that obviously cannot and will not ever be fulfilled, something that shouldn't even be an obstacle on the way towards peace and isn't really worth discussing. But that is not the case. Without a just solution for all Palestinian refugees, and that must include the right of return, this land will never know peace. There is no peace without justice, and there is no justice without return. This is the only key, pun intended, to any viable, sustainable solution to the conflict.